The data collection methods across the different pilot goals are fairly consistent. You will have surveys, you will have interviews, you might even look at your product usage and learning data from the back end, from the front end, student responses, but you could also ask them for additional audio-video recordings or have them write through a journal or maybe share some other documentation. Focusing on the lowest hanging fruit of running a pilot for marketing, you should be collecting demographic information to the extent that you're allowed. You want to document the context of use and the use case of your product. You want to document how long the teacher used, and also if there were favorable impressions of that product. Context of use can refer to, is it a low-income school? Was it a diverse classroom? It could also refer to the time, right? Was it during COVID? Was it in a blended setup? Was it in an in-person setup? Was it in a completely online setup? A lot of this information is going to resonate even if you're running a product trial for, let's say, a workforce environment. What kind of company was that space? What kind of other programs do they have in place? Are they using your product as the primary source? Is it a supplemental tool? Getting information on both your tool, but also importantly, how, when, and for how long your users use your product is going to form the bulk of your information. This kind of data is often collected just at the end of that pilot. Common uses of this data, once analyzed, is to showcase testimonials or write up use cases or examples to showcase with other potential users. Often when people think of running a pilot, they are thinking from the aspects of usability or feasibility. In addition to the kind of information you'd be collecting for your marketing needs, you will also want to collect specific targeted information. What worked? What didn't? What are some features that are on your wish list that you want to collect some preliminary feedback on? And or what are some features that your customers feel might make this easier for them to use? You also want to record the change in your intended outcome. Has the teacher seen a growth? Have scores actually changed? But you also want to record how they are interacting with the product and how they're experiencing the product as a whole. This kind of information is going to have more data being collected, especially if we're looking at feasibility. You want to collect data at the beginning as well as at the end. And that data could often be collected as surveys. You will also have interviews at the end to kind of debrief and or clarify responses from surveys, but you will also be monitoring ongoing product usage and learning data. Remember that a usability or feasibility pilot can be anywhere from a month to 3 months long. So monitoring data will make sure that your pilot is still alive and active and usage hasn't dropped. Data collected from a usability and feasibility study is often used for internal improvements to your product design, to your process, to your onboarding, to your support, or even very simply, the visual design of your product. However, this information could also be used to craft case studies, if successful, or even a simple white paper showcasing what you've learned. When running a pilot for an efficacy study, there will be a lot more information we collect. Think about this section of the video being more cumulative. As the intensity of your goal increases, the more data you want to collect. In addition to the information that you have for marketing, especially the context of implementation, you also want to consider the findings you had from your usability and feasibility studies. What were some known issues? And not just from previous implementations or previous pilots, but in your current efficacy study. What were some known issues? Let's say the server crashed one day. and you couldn't collect data that day. Or policies changed and your teacher couldn't access the product until 6 weeks into the pilot duration. Understanding the context of implementation, the lived experiences through that period of efficacy study is going to help your researcher and you as a company understand the gravity of your findings. Most critical for an efficacy study is to assess the change in intended outcomes. This is often why at EdTech Recharge, we recommend companies to always start with defining their impact, defining what needs to be measured. Data collection tools for efficacy studies is going to be pretty similar, with surveys both at the start and end of the pilot, interviews at the end, occasionally required but strongly recommended, and ongoing learning data. You'll note that there isn't much of a difference in perhaps the method in which a usability or efficacy study is conducted in terms of data collection, but there is a difference when it comes to the kind of questions we're asking, the extent of rigor that we implement, the duration, as well as the extent to which we go into the details and the volume of data that we collect for the two. So though they might sound very similar, they're actually pretty different. Findings from an efficacy study could help you with internal improvements, but is more often just presented as evidence of efficacy when requested by schools and districts. We at EdTech Recharge are always happy to help you as you need, when you need it. Contact us anytime.